Welcome to the Historics Podcast, and it's finally time to decide what is the best GTI ever made. Probably something Tom might have to decide upon later. Stick around, you won't want to miss this.
Buying or selling a classic car? Head to historics.co.uk or click below for a free valuation.
Now, before we get started, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. The really important one is the subscribe button because we see how many people watch these, but only a few of you subscribe. So make sure you subscribe, and it's super, super helpful. It takes 2 seconds, and it's absolutely free. So thank you very much.
You subscribe, we keep filming.
Maybe that'll put them off.
Yeah, maybe get some better guests.
Not hard over here,
try.
sorry.
Right, straight in. Best GTIs ever made. Now, obviously, a bit of a contentious thing. If you go on Google, Volkswagen virtually locked this down. But there were other GTIs.
Yep.
So, first out, what does GTI actually stand for?
I'm going to show myself up once again
Yeah,
as
see?
not
Generally
a car person.
technically important.
So, it was created originally by Maserati, and it was on their 1960 3500 GTI. And the actual wording in Italian, here we go, this is where I'm going to make a real fool of
Grande
myself.
Turismo.
Italians, stop
Grande
listening.
Turismo Iniezione,
Iniezione.
which obviously just means Gran Turismo,
Grand Touring.
Grand Touring, sort of say, injection. Nothing too
There you go.
spectacular. But it was then formed by those, and I think probably the next time it really took hold was, of course, the Mark I GTI,
Yeah.
which started the
People
entire
forget that the
evolution.
first one actually came out in 1973, and actually then production would start in Germany in 1974. Now that's really geeky.
And it was a bit.
That is really
and
geeky.
did you know
It
it
is.
was a bit of a bitzer? So it was actually a fair weight of Audi parts in it. It was a bit of a thrown together. It was designed and it was, revolutionary.
Well-
But like all things like that, it was actually sort of put together.
Luckily it stayed
thrown
in
out.
Germany then.
Well, yes. It was a bit like the first Porsche. Same sort of thing, wasn't
Yeah.
it? It was part Beetle, part everything put together to make the first car, the 356, and then
Yeah.
suddenly rolled on from there.
Well, back in those days, there was a certain German head of the game who probably, if they did get it wrong, probably wouldn't last very long.
Moving on that one. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to pick out a couple each, and we'll talk through all of the GTIs that you could own. Obviously, the golden era is probably late 80s, early 90s, but of course, they're still making GTIs today.
Yep.
So, James, first out the pot, what GTI do you remember hooning around in when you were young?
As company cars, even then, I had a GTI, which is a 16-valve
Blimey.
GTI in the 80s
Yeah.
in London, like every estate agent yuppie. I was one. So we had one of those, which was green,
Yep.
which was great. We loved those. That was the one that everybody wanted at the time. And then in the early 90s, I had a 1.9 GTI Peugeot,
Did you?
which was, honestly, it was like a
So
baked
you
bean
managed-
can with a
these were-
V8 in it.
Both as company cars?
Yes, and they were fantastic. The one with the 1.9, my boss at the time was an ex-rally driver. He had one, I had one, and we used to drift them around Clapham Common in our spare time in the afternoons.
Did you sell any houses?
Yeah, yeah, quite a few. But it was they were both fantastic in their own right. Peugeot obviously very light.
Yep.
The Golf not so light, but great fun. It was a very solid car.
Do you remember driving the Golf? Because having driven them now, later in years when we've all got more modern power steering and such, the Golf does feel heavier, certainly, than the Peugeot, which of course was an era later, because the next car was
Much
the
more
Mark II.
cumbersome. The Peugeot had no power steering. We didn't need it. It was so
No.
light. Even in London, parking it, whatever, it was very easy. But the power, I mean, you could spin front wheels in, obviously first, but second, third and fourth, just about.
Yep.
It was terrific.
On your way to your
Fantastic car.
appointments. So which one would you favour out of the Golf?
No, I'd have the Peugeot.
You'd have the Peugeot.
Definitely.
So Peugeot,
Much more fun.
205.
Not probably quite so good in the head-on. I think the Golf will come out better. But I do think that Peugeot really, even in today's standards, I think, it would give a lot of modern cars a good run for the money.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, so Tom, what have you got up there on that list of GTIs?
I actually used to own a Mark 7.5 Golf GTI, so
Did you? Right up there, yeah.
completely down the other end of the spectrum, really. I loved it just as a kind of daily driver that was a laugh and just absolutely bulletproof. Loved that car. But I remember when I was younger, when I first started learning to drive and kind of looking at hot hatches and loads of things I couldn't insure.
Yes.
You had like the Saxo VTS and stuff, but I did want a 205 1.9 GTI. That was the golden goose, but they were crazy money then. They're absolutely
But
mental
Tom, I
money
think
now.
you hit the nail on the head. They're good fun.
Yeah,
That's what they were built for.
that's exactly it.
You know,
Actually, I remember, and I always remember it's so cool. Actually, our music teacher, so I would have been, 15. The music teacher was the coolest teacher in school. Drove a black 1.9 GTI,
Good boy.
and it was that sort of thing of like everyone
Good
else was
girl.
driving in bigger cars, and he just turned up in this sports car, this little sports car. And I just remember thinking, what a great. But the problem back then was you couldn't blooming well insure the things. I mean,
it was a nightmare.
he would have been in his 40s then. He'd probably been okay. But anyone in that 1920, you aspired to them, but you couldn't insure them.
Yes, thousands. Often the insurance would be sort of multiples of the price of the car.
Yeah, which got worse and worse and worse throughout the 90s.
Yep.
Which probably the golden was that late 80s car before they cottoned on. So you also fondly remember that. What other GTIs have you?
I wanted a Lupo GTI, a VW Lupo GTI. Yeah. There was a big trend of sort of getting those and then putting sort of 993 Porsche wheels on them and stuff and all that kind of
the Lupos,
modified stuff.
the ups. They're sort of more of the. They hunker back to that original
Two-door.
that lighter.
Yeah, the little
Yeah.
the little Lupo
Yeah.
thing with a little kind of frog eye light to kind of look like a mashed Beetle and Polo.
In
stuck
Farnham,
together.
Granny would have that. But in London, something else.
Not the Lupo GTI. They're rare as hens. I saw one the other day and I was
Racy
very
people.
excited. Yeah, I don't think many of them made it. I think they got owned by people that are a bit too exuberant on the road, and they most of them end up around a tree somewhere. So yeah, I still actually really
Good
want
fun.
one of those. Yeah, really good fun, and that's exactly it. And any hot hatch these days is 80 supercar level of performance, if not faster. You look at your Golf Rs or even the Golf GTI these days. You put your foot down, you're doing 70 and a 30 before you even think about it. But back then, you could wring its neck, you get through the first few gears, and you'd probably be somewhere near the speed limit.
Well, there was the original fun, wasn't it? Because actually you could genuinely wring its neck, whereas you can't wring that. You can, but only if you're really, really steaming along.
TDI Golf, you could still give it a good thrashing.
Well, yeah, because you run out. But yeah,
What?
I always found that whenever you had the cars with, I had a 1.1 Fiesta. I've said it before. I used to literally on the red line the whole time, trying to find everything, never use the brakes. But I think you could do that with the old 80s, 90s GTIs as you move forward. And I like about the Lupos, the Ups, and those sort of more modern incarnations is that they're smaller cars now, but actually if you park them next to each other, that's exactly the size they used to be.
Yeah.
And they're all about a small, powerful little engine, 150 brake horsepower,
Yeah,
not
perfect.
much more.
No.
And then that way, then it's all about being light,
Yeah.
less passengers,
Turbo.
and throwing it around, which is where all the fun comes from, isn't it?
Yeah. of course.
See, when I was looking back through a lot of these, and naturally, like you, straight into the 205 GTI, and always remember the Golf GTI. But I also remember when my dad's company car, I had a Citroen, I think it was a BX at the time.
Yeah.
And then I remember always wanting, your dad would always come in with a basic example. He's like, Dad,
Yeah.
why haven't you got the GTI? Not realising that it's not that easy.
Yeah,
That-
yeah.
or benefit in kind or whatever. You would just
I think it's
basically
the
you wouldn't be able
CX
to eat.
GTI. It's
There's
like,
a CX GTI
it's
as well.
light, and to sit in one, if you've never sat in one, honestly, it's like your grandmother's armchair. It's so
Really?
comfortable.
But what I liked about the Citroens is that they were almost trying to make spaceships. They almost thought they saw the future. This is what we're going to make it like. Missed by a country mile, but in a sort of true French terms, it was just bonkers. And then throw a turbo on it, a 1.6 engine again gets that sort of magic
The
150 brake
suspension was
horsepower.
terrific. Road holding, not bad. But
Yeah. I mean,
bit wallowy.
I
but
wouldn't
not
say
too
they're the
bad.
prettiest cars, and they're probably not the most collectible. But if you had a stunning example sat there with literally maintained from that last auction we had one.
Yeah.
To me, it would be more interesting than what I have seen lots of now, which is with the Golf GTIs. We're starting to see now the Mark II Golf GTIs, the big bumper 16 valves, which of course were known for being bulbous and heavier, but were really, really popular. And I think
So
the same
iconic.
thing. Yeah, so iconic. And probably a better car, just a bit heavy.
Well,
at
you
that
had
point.
electric windows.
Yeah. I mean, helps the
That was a
luxuries.
plus. Yeah, but it was a luxury in those days.
So what else you thought that you can imagine? What other GTIs could really be punching up there with what is inevitably a 205 and Golf sort of head to
Well,
head?
Suzuki must have done an equivalent, I suppose.
They did a
at the time.
Suzuki Swift.
Swift
Yep.
GTI, which
100 brake horsepower, 0 to 60, I think was about 9 seconds, made out of a crisp packet.
and there's a chap used to hill climb one.
Really?
Yeah, and this thing arrived, and he had it completely, had it all decked out with roll cage and everything else. And he and his wife used to tip up to Shelsley Walsh, and we used to sit there, we think, oh, here he comes. And he used to drive fabulous single seaters back in the 70s with V8s in the Rover, and then in Cosworth, and so on and so on. And in his latter days, a bit older, He had a Suzuki Swift, but he'd had it all tweaked. It sat on the line, looking as though he was about to tip up at Waitrose, and this thing flew off the line. So, right, okay. But it had a suspension loaded tight. It was amazing.
I looked through.
Fantastic.
I sort of deliberately looked for as many GTIs I could find, and there was almost all of them were sort of in that, as I say, that era between 85 and 95. It did keep going though. I mean, even down to the Nissan Pulsar GTI R.
Yeah. I wanted one of those so much.
And that was massively rapid. I mean, that was, I think, 250 or so brake horsepower, four-wheel drive Subaru Impreza Solus territory.
Anything.
And it was horrifically ugly, but really, really quick. And then even, I think, with Peugeot, because one of my favourites, and still to this day, my favourites is the 306 GTI 6. It was actually not that powerful. It was only about 150, 160 brake horsepower, and what was a bigger car.
I haven't seen one of those literally since I was a kid.
I had a look.
It just reminded me of those.
I
don't think they were ever as popular, but they were still a good car.
But they were actually really understated, and they were really good to drive. Bit like the 205.
Didn't they come in that awful colour?
They're that bronzy colour.
Yeah. I think that's what put a lot of people off. But I love that now.
Like the Renault Fuego. You remember that? How many of those you ever see?
I don't even know.
There's no match on a GTI. It was a bloody awful
But you
car,
imagine 10 years' time, when maybe even less than that, we start to looking for these sort of 90s hot hatches.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I saw a GTI 6. I really cannot remember. And a lot of them would have been, I'm sure, written off, scrapped, thrown away. So finding one that's in particularly good condition, well, there's plenty of 205 GTIs and Golf GTIs about, but I don't remember seeing things like
Probably
that.
even drive it to the scrapyard.
Well, it's a French car. I mean, they don't last forever. So we've got Citroens, Peugeots, the Volkswagen, Toyota Corolla GTIs. We've got... There's all sorts out there.
Astra GTEs.
Oh, see, yeah, but then you get really weird Corolla, GSIs, GC. I mean, it basically, that GTI formed a number of different variants of ways of saying sporty. Prerequisites, you think, on a GTI, it's got to have probably 100 brake horsepower at least.
Yeah.
Even in that era. At least 100 brake horsepower. It's got to be realistically three-door, hasn't it?
Ultimately three-door.
I mean, if you put five in it, suddenly you're just sort of...
You got to have the sport seats. Yeah. You know, you got to have a few...
It's got to be manual.
Definitely.
So, your favourite?
Has to be the Golf.
Golf?
Sadly.
You've gone to Golf, yeah?
I've changed my mind.
Golf Mark 1.
I think because... I think the road holding is better. They're more solid. I think the trouble is with that Peugeot is that unless it's a dry day and you hoof it, you know, you're going to be in lots of trouble. And if I would wrap it round something, I'd rather wrap a Golf than come out.
I love this. So the reason you're choosing the Golf,
I've had a second think about it. If I have my childhood again or my youth again, I think,
Okay, so
go for the Golf.
Golf, Mark 1, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
What would be your choice?
I actually I drove a Mark 1 Golf GTI recently. My business partner actually bought do you remember the green one?
I do remember from here,
yeah. I drove it. I liked it. They say never meet your heroes. I wasn't that. I think I was measuring it against unrealistic modern standards. I think I'd still go for a 205.
So 205.
1.9 GTI. That was my hero car.
1.9, no sunroof.
No sunroof.
What colour?
Black.
We go black.
Yeah.
I think sadly, I think I probably have to pick the best GTI of all time. I would go 205. It's like that Golf Mark 1 is always going to be iconic. It did start the whole thing. It was the reason that GTI really exists. But that first incarnation of the 205 just took it that little bit level further. They took all the ideals, made it a little bit... It's actually prettier as well. Yeah. Quicker. I think that probably over time, the pair of them are just as iconic, but I'd prefer to drive a 1.9. The 1.6 would lose. I think it has to be the 1.9. It just gives that little...
Yeah, probably right.
But I mean, and ironically, of the two, I think from auction prices, I had a quick look through, the most expensive Mark 1 sold to date that I could find was about £45,000.
Wow.
The most expensive 205 was €68,000.
Wow. Is that what they are?
Yeah, well, this would have been a very low mileage.
How many miles?
Beautiful car with lovely...
I know, but 60 odd grand for that.
Yeah, we only have to see what people really hunker up.
What's an acceptable one in the UK?
Probably looking at late teens, I think, for an acceptable
really?
one. Because the problem is they get very dogged very quick if you don't have a good one, don't they? So, and people are starting to restore them, and then you'll start to see huge amounts of money on restorations to get them to where they want to be. But in all honesty,
Well, if the mileage is slightly high, I mean, those cars were only built for one thing, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean,
So mileage is slightly high. That engine's had a tough life.
yeah. I mean,
The rest of it,
they'll be
all
fully rebuilt,
shiny
won't they?
and polished and new carpets, whatever. But
And
the
on that 205, of course, they had that same engine. I think was in the 309 GTI, which no one bought. I mean, I can't remember seeing many of those from new. And even in the 405, I think GTI, which was the big saloon car, I think was a similar variant of that engine. But again, you're right. If they're high mileage,
you hear about people restoring them, which is fine. They spend the money in the restoration, but I bet they don't take the engine out, strip it, rebuild it, put it back.
No. Probably cost about 50p to fix the engine anyway.
So we're set. Tom, deciding factor, best GTI ever.
A lot of pressure here. 205.
205.
GTI 1.9. There we go. Don't know why I got the final say on that. Most ignorant at the table, but I'll have that. Thank you very much.
So on to other matters motoring. Obviously, this podcast will come out just ahead of our Bicester auction. And we've those sitting here, just come out of Goodwood week, which was last week.
Yep.
Which amazingly had the Saturday cancelled because of high winds. Is that a first?
Yeah.
Well,
apparently.
it is. And of course, it's not just to do with cars being blown off or motorcycles or
trade
anything else.
stands.
You've also got the trees, which most part of the hill climb, probably the last half of the section is tree lined. And of course, danger with the trees, etc., etc.
And having been there, all of those trade stands on top of it.
Temporary structures, I think, was there because they've got no way of vouching how well all those stands are put together because obviously they're all third parties. So, and if they're told that there's high winds and something clobbers someone, their necks are going to be on the line instantly.
I've always thought that. I mean, I went to the very first one, and I've been to many of them, and I've always thought that, the race drivers are asked to go to the Festival of Speed. They're there to race. They're not there to potter around because it's in their nature and their blood. So. They floor the cars from the start line to the finish. And the only thing between that car and the general public are hay bales. Now, one day, something will happen.
Well, they're going, these modern cars now, they're going so fast up that hill. Some of them, and they've got batteries under them, so they're weighing 2-3 times the amount they ever used to. Yeah. And they're hitting, God knows how
even
fast
on demonstrations, they are absolutely
some of these electric cars, they weigh tons, and they're absolutely pacing it up that hill.
They have Le Mans cars.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a big accident with one of the cars, which I saw came off the track, went through all the hay bales, and landed, very close to the final barrier before the general public. They all scattered. And of course, the wheel fell off the Coombs Mark II Jaguar by one, number plate famous car. Okay, that happens. I mean, that's unfortunate. But luckily, I mean, hit 2 members of the public. But
how they got away with that, I don't know.
There's a point where we stay in everything. The excitement goes. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, there are inherent risks. But I remember standing RAC rallies back in the 90s, and that was really sketchy. You'd be stood on the curb as the car would come past. There is, of course, a place for the safety, but it is motor racing, and you do sign up to go in. And if you,
but I remember that the Festival of Speed is not a competition.
No, it's much more a demonstration.
They are on that fine line between demonstration and competition. Yeah. Of course, they want to beat you going up the hill and have the fastest time of the day because you want that kudos. That is not a demonstration.
Yeah. No.
So
anything timed, that's why they track data.
I hope it doesn't change because, as you rightly say, Matt, it will change the configuration and the feeling to pick up Armco barriers, put up mesh to stop flying debris, etc. It will change it, and that nobody wants.
I think the organisers are in a tough space now because they've had some near misses this year. If something happens next year and someone does get wiped out, instantly everyone will say, well, last year someone nearly died and you've done nothing and blah, blah, blah. And then their necks will be on the line. So even if the organisers don't want to put mesh up and put people up 3 miles away from everything,
and the moment
they,
you do
they
that,
might have to.
They changed part of it, the finishing line, sadly, some years ago, Jeffrey Dawson-Damer, of course, famously, he actually had a heart attack as he was going towards the finishing line, veered off and hit the finishing post, killed a marshal and killed him.
Christ.
And that they changed that configuration there so that it was just a little bit of wood around a great metal pole, which he hit, and that was it. And the marshal was hit as well. So they did change that configuration, but not massively in terms of health and safety. No,
I think it's a wonder. Though I do think it's a wonder that in this day and age, both the Goodwood events can still go ahead and you can still get that close to it and still get that feeling, because it would be a shame if you had.
I hope they don't change it. But
I mean, the Formula One has to because of the sheer speeds and the competition, but you are a way away from competition in Formula One now.
And
It's
all
much
hill
more
climbs are like that. I mean, I've motor raced at all the hill climbs.
and they're all very, very robust.
There is nothing. You don't have arm codes. Well, there are arm codes in certain areas. Most of it is a bank or a tree. Well, frankly, if you hit it, you shouldn't have been there anyway. And if you hit it, you're generally going to come off worse than the general public. Yeah. But nevertheless, there is more probably at Goodwood in terms of bales than there are.
They're staked in as well. In fairness, I think they are. Stuck to the
it's not just sort of plonked.
Yeah.
But and this brings me to my next point. Actually, without these bastions of motor racing, harking back to the past, whether it be Goodwood, Brooklands, and so forth, and Goodwood doing it so well because of the competitive racing, you wouldn't have places like Bicester where we go as well, where people genuinely go there for that sort of feel of the nostalgia.
Yeah.
And it's a great location. We'll go there for the next auction in September, and I'm sure we'll be doing some filming up there, hopefully with Haggerty, who are our new insurance partners, and just set themselves up there a little base.
Good.
So,
nice.
But that is exactly why people want to go to these places.
Yeah.
They have that hark back to how it used to be. And you say the straw bales at Goodwood, and then the fact that you see the racetracks and you feel it.
But
and
it's the
everyone
close
takes their car
proximity to the cars, the smell of the Castrol R, if you want to put it in your fuel tank. Everybody, and you can walk up, you can go and chat with all the past stars and present stars if you want to. And that has always been the attraction of the Festival of Speed. Whereas, if you go to
that and the car park.
Well, the car park is better than what you see at the track. But there is the attraction. I mean, that is the event. That's what Lord March has created, and uniquely.
So at Bicester, which is in September, we'll all be there, of course. Some cars will be
Very
consigned. By the
exciting.
time this podcast is out and you're watching our lovely faces, there will be some cars online, but there will still be some time to consign. So if you do have something, even for Bicester or for later in the Mercedes-Benz world, please do get in contact. Link will be in the bio below. You can call us or email us. So do get in contact, and we look forward to seeing you all there. Now, one last topic I wanted to, before we have a bit of fun, was mileage. We spoke about it earlier with the modern GTIs, about the lower mileage, and I hate it. I really hate it. I hate that it's become, especially with modern cars, so much about mileage that the actual essence of the car has become secondary to the mileage on the clock. We all know that a car with negligible mileage is going to be a poor car to run, to own. And my question is if you had the option of buying a car with 2,500 miles on the clock, with 50,000 miles on the clock, or 100,000 miles on the clock, the 5,000 mile car never driven, the 50,000 mile car has been used robustly, average mileage, average history, or the 100,000 mile car has one owner, an absolutely impeccable history, and is beautiful. Which one do you end up pitching for, and why?
I'll go first on this one. You want?
Go on, Tom.
It depends why you're buying the car. If you're buying one just to keep running to the floor, use every day, cherish, and just that's it, till death do you part, probably the 100,000 mile car. If you're buying something as occasional, polish it up, take it out on weekends, and potentially think at some point I might need to sell this to pay for my kids' school fees or something like that, and value retention is a thing, but you do still want to get some use out of it, it's going to be the 50,000 mile car. But if you want something that you just think, I'm going to buy this, sit on it for 10 years, I don't want to drive the bloody thing, it'll be the 2,000 mile car, I think. Because the value retention is going to be better than the low mileage car. Even though that might be illogical. I get what you say.
That's the point, isn't it? Because, so, for instance, these E-Types, Pagodas, we're surrounded by beautiful older cars. Mileage is not important, is it? It's the condition, usually when they're restored. And I do wonder, with these modern cars, we obsess about the mileage to the point where they'll get to an age where actually the mileage doesn't actually mean much anymore. We've had some old classic cars, 60s cars, where it's got very, very low mileage, but actually it's nowhere near the cachet that it would have been if it was 20 years old.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, actually, to me, just, again, I understand the value. Everyone's obsessed with the value. And
I think it's a very
hunkering
contentious question concerning classic cars and the mileage. I do, because if you were to buy a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, who cares what the mileage is?
Exactly.
It doesn't. Who cares?
It's not displayed on the outside, is it?
How many times do you think that Phantom 1, 1929 Phantom 1, fabulous looking car, how many times that engine been rebuilt? So if that's gone over the clock twice, 3 times, who cares? If you have a Ferrari Boxer, I know of a 512 BBI Boxer that has a full Class H, has done 211 miles from new.
Right,
now, you either buy it, store it, put a duvet on it and forget it, or drive it like a modern old classic. What are you going to do? Now, it depends why you want to buy your asset.
Yep.
At the moment in the UK, luckily, the asset that we're all sitting around are tax-free on capital growth. So sit on it and wait, flog it, keep as a pension pot or whatever you want to do, and you don't pay any tax on it.
What I can't get my head around, though, is the idea of buying it and not using it. Because to me, isn't art or antiques or something like that more useful if you're not using it? A car is to be used.
I think some of these are art, though. I would argue that some of the
agree.
designs around us, they are movable art. They're art grade. Not everything, but some of these icons, like an F40, yeah, it's fun to drive, but actually that'd look equally as good as a feature just stuffed in your house. I know it's sacrilegious not to drive it and whatever, but I think some of these cars are art grade. Even something like the Testarossa, arguably terrible to drive. I mean, absolutely unbelievable to look at.
Possibly better as art.
And a lot of collections, you know, they don't run them.
Yeah.
I mean, these old cars do have to be run. You know, they're like a human. You need feeding, you need drinking, you need food, you need to keep them going.
Yeah.
You know, whereas collections like the Donington collection, they do actually run those.
Yeah.
Frequently, they take them out for displays or whatever, but they do run them. Other Bewley, for instance, most of those cars don't run.
Yeah.
They go in there, plonk, and they're left there.
They're all just perishing and everything.
The Haynes Motor Museum, if anyone's ever been there, it's great. Most of those cars, which, you know, old man Haynes bought them originally, they've sat there and not moved for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, so they're screwed then. They basically
Well,
need
you
rebuilds.
need to take them and completely redo them to get them on the road again.
Yeah.
So it depends why you want to buy them. Goes back to that original question.
Yeah, and
So
to me, I think
does it matter? Depends on your asset and what you want to do with that asset and why you bought it in the first place on a 5-year program, 10-year, 15-year.
Do you think, though, and this is a question for you, working in auctions, as we have done for the last decade and longer, has it become more asset-driven and less enthusiast-driven?
I think it will become more asset-driven as the petrol and diesel cars get phased out. The electric car will come in, probably not in my lifetime, totally, but
You've only got a couple of
eventually
years left.
they will. How rude! I think yes, I do think that, and I think that they will become an asset. You will be able to move them around like a piece of art. You won't drive them on the road, but you'll be given a track day at Silverstone, Brands Hatch, wherever else.
Yeah.
You can take your car there, thrash them all day if you like, all the fumes, lovely,
Yep.
and then put them on your trailer and take them home again.
One of the things I like about Mark's ethos on historics actually is it's always been very eclectic, and because we deal with cars from £5,000 up to sort of probably £500,000, a bit more, you do get to meet and deal with clients that are just enthusiasts that just want to buy a car, work on the car, drive the car, as well as many in here, they are sort of asset driven, expensive purchases. So I do like that you get to meet people that actually they want to tinker with cars. And that old, because I worry actually that the next generation, I mean my generation really, are less engaged with the car. The car has become less about the mechanicals, and thus there's less
Well, you can't change a
enthusiasm.
plug in a modern car. You can't change a light bulb.
And there was a lot to do when you used to own an older car.
To learn because you can't do anything.
I took out the new Ferrari 296 the other day, this hybrid thingy, and I made that point in my video. I said, in 15 years' time, whilst the technology is fantastic now and it's working all brilliantly and isn't it wonderful, it's cut into electric mode, it's silent in traffic, fantastic. In 15 years' time, that it's like, imagine getting a laptop out from 15 years ago.
The example of cars,
or even a phone from 6 years ago.
Yes.
It's finished.
These things are, they've got a lifespan now, and I think cars are going the same way.
Yeah.
They're not designed. There are a few. You're right. The Ferraris.
You open it up and there's just panels of circuit boards under everything, and you just think if someone stops making the parts for these, you're absolutely screwed. Most of these old stuff, someone can make a part pretty much.
I like
for
the
most
idea
these
sometimes
things.
of picking up an old MGB, and it's an old car to use. Some of the old vintage cars which people still work on, they're great fun because part of the joy of it is it's the whole thing is an event, not just the drive, the warming up, the maintenance, everything's an event. So I'm hoping it doesn't die out completely. I'm hoping it doesn't all become
provided there are
assets.
professionals within the classic car industry who can rebuild. They've got laser machines, computer driven.
Yeah.
You can make anything.
Yep.
Anything. Even if it's on, the 3D machine or whatever it is.
Yep.
You can make anything for an E-Type or whatever it is. The modern cars, how do you do that?
Forget it.
How do you do that?
Forget it.
How do you make a part for a Tesla?
Yeah.
3D
You
printer.
can't go
and
to
computer
Bicester
system.
Heritage and say, "Excuse me, Rodney, could you make something for that Tesla?" it won't work.
It's not a thing. I mean,
Really?
I'm not going to say what I drove here in today.
A Tesla.
Yeah. It's an appliance.
In 20 years' time,
I think
wanna
we're
find
seeing
It is like a kettle.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a fork in the road where we are just having cars that are appliances, like the electric cars, they are just appliances. You run them on a lease and then you just hand them back, and wherever they go, which is the opposite of sustainable.
Yep.
That's another argument. And you'll see the enthusiast market, which are sort of weekend cars. And
Gotta love Elon then.
I honestly couldn't care less. It's just a cheap lease.
Object.
I'll wrap this up. So I always thought that the best way, full circle, was to electric cars to become a bit like older cars, whereby you'd have a chassis and then you'd have a body. And you could have just had the battery chassis and then just interchange the bodies. And then suddenly it does become much more renewable. But unfortunately, the batteries are the bits that are moving faster in technology than everything else.
What do they do with the old batteries?
I think we'll get into lithium theft at some point as
do
well.
they go?
I think people will start nicking electric cars for the lithium as lithium goes up. One final thing, on the topic of kind of mileage, owners, amount of previous owners. I've always been of the opinion lots of owners isn't a bad thing, because every time you buy a car, you get it checked out.
They get it serviced.
You get it. You get it checked out. You
Very
get it looked
true.
at. You get it inspected, and blah blah blah. And you spend money, whether you like it or not. You spend money within the first month. You do all sorts of bits and bobs, right? And before you sell a car, what do you do? On the whole,
here's a top
spend
tip.
money as well.
Here's a top tip. When you're looking at previous owners, look at the time in which those owners owned the car.
Yeah.
Because often what you see with previous owners, if a car's jumped around a lot in a very short distance of time, there's probably a reason for it.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, those
So
80s 911s, you should chop and change.
Yes.
They've ticked the box.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
done it.
But if you
And
look
move it
at
on.
if they've had them for, I'd say probably 18 months, then you've done enough to do what you're ticking the box, and you would have maintained and looked after it at that point. If they've jumped around a little bit more, I'm a little bit nervous.
And the mileage has
personally.
gone up with it. If it's got 10 owners and 200,000 miles,
Yeah.
fantastic. If it's got 15 owners and 3,000 miles, you think, well,
Yeah.
what on earth?
And you can also get really overcomplicated, because obviously, if you're looking at a car with 7 owners, which isn't a great deal, but there could be 3 within the first 2 months. You know, pre-registered first owner, second owner.
Yeah.
And then also families can move them. So you're right. I think that the tip is really look into that history file, because it can, just looking at the number, can really divert you from the car.
I always look for tacky mods. So if someone's like put privacy film on the windows, or painted the wheels black, or coloured in like
Chrome
letters, or
strip on the around.
anything that says I'm not an enthusiast, I'm just a moron, I will try and avoid as like kind of a.
Is Moron on the V5?
Unfortunately, it's not. No, you have to look for telltale signs.
Most of Tom's, yes.
I mean, it's actually in French. You
check
say
mine,
Moron. Moron. It sounds a lot better, doesn't it?
Right, should we finish up the serious stuff?
I
And
think
let's
so,
get on to
yeah.
a bit of a GTI-themed
Go.
quiz, of which I'm sure you'll both
dear.
fail miserably.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But, okay, so I've
Cheers.
got
Try.
7 questions, okay?
Right.
Most of them multiple choice. So you've got a shooting chance here.
Okay.
So the first one, and I've said a few of these things in earlier, so you might even get a really...
I wasn't listening.
Okay, this is an easy one. How many iterations of the Golf GTI has there been? Oh, come on, this is the easiest one of the quiz.
What are we on now? 9? 10? Or are you counting the point
here we
fives
go,
as
here
well?
we go.
Mark 1,
7,
2,
8, or 9?
9.
Oh God, no, it must be 9. Yeah.
We're currently on 8.
Oh,
No.
sods.
I think the 9th was made last week.
It probably was. But you're
Google
waiting.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2. How much brake horsepower did a 205 GTI 1.6 have? Was it 112 brake horsepower, 115 brake horsepower, or 121 horsepower?
5.
112.
James with 115, stealing the march. Was that just a guess, wasn't it? Yes. Okay, so, and I'm not sure about this, it's blame Google or just write in the comments and slag me off if need be, but what was the most popular market for the original Mark 1 GTI?
Which country?
Yeah, which country?
Or which age group?
Which country?
Germany.
I'm going to say somewhere
Or you
niche in
go-
Asia.
Somewhere niche in Asia. So, interestingly, according to one Google review I found, it was actually France, which might explain why the 205 GTI was made
Quite
rapidly
possibly.
after. So, obviously, it was well received there, and the crazy French was sort of thinking, no, this is not good enough. We can't. So, France, apparently. Now, again, if I'm wrong, write that in the comments, please. Nearest the pin, this one. Nice and easy. What is the 0 to 60 time for the Citroen BX GTI?
And what's the
Nearest the pin. Go
You
on.
gotta-
You can guess, and I'll see who's closest. So the Citroen BX, I can tell you it did 123 miles an hour. It was shaped like a slightly angular brick.
9.2?
9.2 for James.
9 dead.
9 dead. Tom wins it. It's 8.9.
Oh,
Do
okay.
the Citroen BX a disservice, the pair of you.
Okay.
Okay, this is another one. How much, when new, we haven't spoken about this yet, was the Rover Metro GTI? Was it? It was in the mighty 95 brake horsepower, so I think it's slightly underpowered. Should have done 100. So was it £12,000? Was it £9,500? Or £7,000 for the mighty Rover GTI?
7.
Yeah, 7, but even that sounds like too much.
How many are still on the
It was
road?
actually 9,500.
Too much money.
Yeah.
No wonder it
That
didn't
sounds
last.
like a lot, doesn't it?
That is a
Yeah.
rip-off.
But I don't know what a new Volkswagen Up GTI is, but I think it's probably an 11, 12, isn't it? So.
No, mate, everything's 30 grand these days.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, everything. Just doesn't matter. It's
Shows how
30
much I
grand.
pay attention,
I
yeah.
think. I don't know.
What do you want, £30,000?
Yeah.
Okay, so according to How Many Left, the website that we all use to figure out how many are actually registered on the road, how many 306 GTI 6s are left on the were left on UK roads in 2022?
50?
Which you want me to give you a multiple choice on it?
Go on then.
So I've got three options: 250, 720, or 1,122.
250.
250, surely.
Yeah, I think I gave that away earlier. It's
Yeah.
only 250 registered, of which a few
Does
of them
that
probably
make
are
them
there.
rare or just the fact they're rubbish?
No, I think, well, they're French, so they don't last.
You could argue
very
the
long.
point. Well,
Both.
at least their wine does.
Yeah. I reckon if you pick one up now, the gearbox and the engine's probably really good. The body's fallen off of it.
Yeah, like Alpha Suds.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, like an
Yeah,
old Alpha. Okay, and the final question. We are 1-1. No, yes, 1-1 at the moment. You both got that question. 2-2, I suppose. How fast did the Golf GTI Mark 8 Club Sport, and what time did it lap the Nürburgring? Was it 8 minutes and 2 seconds, 7 minutes and 54 seconds, or 9 minutes and 52 seconds?
754. I don't know.
You've got it, 7:54.
Yes.
Really?
Taste it.
I know
Really?
low
Gosh.
7s are like
Okay.
supercars and
Yeah.
whatever. Under 7 is like hypercars.
To put that in context, that's 1 second faster than a Ferrari F430.
I'd much rather not have a Ferrari.
Well, you can have the Golf. Well, apparently, because that Club Sport actually has a Nürburgring button setting, and it softens the dampeners, but gives you all the beans because of
sounds like-
riding the curbs.
That's very useful on the M3 at fleet services.
Well, actually, we've been talking about this when we've driven a couple of Ferraris and things this year.
Yeah.
Softening the dampers but having the power is actually where you want.
Yeah.
Because none of
And
our roads are blooming
modern
good enough.
Ferraris have the bumpy road setting, so you
Yeah.
can put it in all singing, all dancing, gearbox, throttle response, blah blah. But it actually slackens off. So on B roads, the car actually is still on the floor
And it
for a
makes
lot
a
of the time,
massive,
which is
massive
great.
difference because you can genuinely use power and not lose your back.
Do you get a speed camera aware machine with that?
That you don't know, I'm afraid. With your license,
put Waze on.
you'd be in trouble.
My
wouldn't you?
license, I
Yes.
think. Yeah.
We can't bring that up on camera because you're
No,
just
no, you
vindicating
mustn't.
for speeding in public
I'm
places.
still on the road, however.
Okay, so we best wrap this up. Thank you very much for listening. Remember, if you have enjoyed, please do like and subscribe. We do need those subscriptions, otherwise we have to keep bringing James in on these podcasts.
And I get fired, so please subscribe.
I might get invited again.
Keep your eyes peeled on our social media. Of course, so upcoming is the Bicester auction, so cars will be online. They'll also be on our Instagram accounts. You'll be able to see them as we consign them, so that's a lot of fun. And we'll be back on a podcast at Bicester. I'm hoping Haggerty will have us in their little clubhouse. That would be fun.
Fingers crossed.
And possibly with Vicky if she's back off her holidays, if she ever wants to come back again.
I saw her at Goodwood the other day.
Well, maybe she's just lying to us and she's not here at all. So for all the other details, any lot list details, please go to the website, historics.co.uk. We'll see you very soon. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.